Chapter 9. Congratulations! Bobby pulled open her locker door and turned to greet a girl she didn't know. Thanks, she said, smiling. I'm Carrie Taylor, the girl said, shifting the books she was carrying. She was a pretty, fragile-looking girl with blonde hair, even lighter and finer than Bobby's, and a warm, friendly smile. I have science lab, 6th period, too. I've seen you there. Yeah? Right, Bobby replied. I've seen you, too. I just wanted to say hi and congratulations, Carrie said with a shrug. Then she added, That accident must have been scary. Yeah, Bobby said. It was? Well, see you tomorrow. Right? See you. The long corridor was emptying out as kids headed for home or after-school jobs. Bobby could still hear the ringing applause in her ears, the cheers, the shouts, the pounding of the drums echoing off the walls. Wow, I just feel so great, Bobby thought, pulling some books and a binder from the top shelf of her locker. I feel as if I could fly home. A few other kids she'd seen around school but didn't really know, called out congratulations as they passed by. Maybe Shadyside High is an okay place, Bobby thought happily. During her first weeks in school, she had wondered if she'd ever get to like it. The kids all seemed so snobby. They all seemed to have known each other their whole lives. Bobby wondered if she'd ever fit in or find friends of her own. But that day had erased all of her worries. It was going to be a great school year, Bobby decided. Great, great, great. Everything was great. Still in her cheerleader uniform, she looked up and down the hall. Seeing that it was empty, she performed a high leap, landed, and did a cartwheel that nearly carried her into the wall. Having gotten that out of her system, she collected her books, stuffed them into her backpack, and, humming to herself, headed out the back door to the student parking lot. Even the weather is great today, she thought, stopping to take a deep breath. The afternoon sky was still high and cloudless. The air felt warm and dry, more like summer than a day in autumn. Near the fence, 2 girls sat on the hood of a car, talking to a boy in a maroon and white leather jacket. Beside them, another car revved up noisily. 2 boys were puzzling over a bike with a flat rear tire, scratching their heads and scowling. Beyond the student parking lot, Shadyside Park stretched out, still green and vibrant. A broad, grassy field with an empty baseball diamond set in one corner led to thick woods. I wish Mom and Dad were here, Bobby thought. I can't wait to tell them the news. I'm still in a state of shock, she told herself. It was such a surprise. I never dreamed that Miss Green would name me captain. The other girls must have been shocked too, Bobby realized. Especially Kimmy. Kimmy. She hadn't stopped to think about Kimmy, but now the thought descended on her like a heavy cloud, bringing her back to earth. Had Kimmy come over to congratulate her? Bobby struggled to remember. She had been surrounded by everyone all at once. But no, she didn't remember Kimmy being one of them. I'd better call her or something, she thought. Just then, a hand touched her shoulder, startling her out of her thoughts. Hi. She stared into a boy's face. He was handsome, with friendly dark brown eyes that crinkled at the corners, a shy smile, and lots of unbrushed brown hair that seemed to be tossed around on his head. Hi, she returned the greeting. It was Chip Chasner, quarterback of the Tigers. She had seen him a lot during outdoor practices. He was friendly with the other cheerleaders, but he had never said a word to Bobby. He fell into step with her as she crossed the parking lot. He was broad-shouldered and tall, especially in his shoulder pads and cleats. I just wanted to say, way to go, he said shyly, his dark eyes smiling at her. Thanks, she said, suddenly shy too. I was surprised. I didn't think they'd pick me, since I'm new and all. We haven't really met. I'm Charles Chasner, he said, but everyone calls me Chip. I know, Bobby replied, feeling her face grow hot. I think you're a really good player. Thanks, he beamed at her. Her compliment seemed to make him forget his shyness. I've watched you too. Tough game Friday night, Bobby said, watching the 2 boys dispiritedly walk the disabled bike away. Yeah, Winstead is always tough, Chip said, waving to a couple of girls who had just emerged from the building. They'll probably cream us. Bobby laughed. Wow, you sure got confidence, she said sarcastically. No, come on, he replied. I'm pumped for the game, but you've got to be realistic. They went to the state finals last year. How'd you learn to throw the ball so far? Bobby asked, stopping at the edge of the parking lot, shifting her backpack onto her shoulders. Just practice a lot? Yeah, he nodded. My dad and I used to practice throwing in the backyard. We still do when he has the time. He's working 2 jobs these days, so it's kind of tough. My parents both work all the time, Bobby told him, but I'm usually at cheerleading practice or studying, so I wouldn't see them much even if they were home. I guess my dad got me my first football when I was 5, Chip said, leaning against the parking lot fence. The wind ruffled his thick brown hair, his dark eyes studying Bobby as he talked. He loves football, but he never had a chance to play. Always had to work. So I guess he wanted to do his playing through me. That can be a lot of pressure, Bobby said thoughtfully. Chip's expression hardened. I can handle it, he said softly. I just meant, Bobby started, surprised by his abrupt answer. Are you going out with anybody or anything? Chip interrupted. Caught off guard by the change of subject, Bobby hesitated. No, she finally managed to reply. Are you? He shook his head. No, not anymore. Want to meet after the Winstead game. He stared at her intently. Could go get a pizza, you know. Hang out with some other guys. Great, Bobby replied. Sounds good. Okay. Well, okay. Excellent. He glanced up at the clock over the back of the school. I've got to practice, he said, pushing away from the fence. After the game, wait for me outside the stadium locker room, okay? He didn't wait for her to reply. Instead, he slipped his helmet on and began jogging toward the practice field across from the baseball diamond, taking long, easy strides. What an amazing day, Bobby thought, watching him as he ran. So many good things happening at once. She shook her head, somewhat dazed by it all. Her next thought was, I'll probably be hit by a truck on the way home. The next evening, a warm, almost balmy Thursday night, Bobby finished her dinner, then hurried to Jennifer's house to study. Since the accident, she and Jennifer had become close. Unlike some of the other girls who wanted to shut the accident out of their minds and forget that it had ever happened, Bobby had visited Jennifer in the hospital every day. Bobby had been touched by her new friend's bravery and serenity. Soon she and Jennifer were talking easily, sharing their thoughts and feelings as if they had been longtime friends. Bobby parked her car on the street and made her way up the smooth asphalt drive. Jennifer lived in a sprawling, modern ranch house in North Hills, the wealthiest section of Shadyside. What a contrast to Fear Street, Bobby thought wistfully, her eyes taking in the manicured lawns, raked clean, and the well-cared-for houses. The streetlights flickered on as Mrs. Daly opened the door to her. Oh, hi, Bobby, she said, looking tired and drawn in the pale porch light. Jennifer's waiting for you in the den. Bobby eagerly made her way across the carpeted living room with its low, sleek furniture of chrome and white leather and into the small den, closing the door behind her. Did you talk to Kimmy? She asked Jennifer, skipping any greeting. Jennifer was seated in her wheelchair between two red leather couches that faced each other. She was wearing navy blue sweats, the sweatshirt sleeves rolled up above her elbows. Her red-brown hair was tied behind her head in a single braid. She had a textbook in her lap. I talked to her, she replied, her face expressionless. Slowly, a smile spread across her full lips. She's coming back. Oh, good, Bobby said, breathing a long sigh. She dropped her backpack on the checkered tile floor and plopped down in the red couch on Jennifer's right. I can't believe I didn't even notice that she had run out. You were a little excited, Jennifer said dryly. But I should have known Kimmy would be upset, Bobby insisted, rubbing her hand against the smooth leather of the couch arm. But I didn't see her. I didn't see anything. It was all so... She couldn't finish her thought. Anyway, I talked to her, Jennifer said, wheeling herself closer until she was right in front of Bobby. She's not a happy camper, but I got her to come around. Her mouth fell into an unhappy pout. She avoided Bobby's eyes. Kimmy and I used to be so close, but not anymore. I'm really sorry, Bobby said quickly. If it's my fault, No, it isn't, Jennifer interrupted. You didn't do anything, really. How did you get her to come back on the squad? Bobby asked. I told her we needed her. I said, what would happen if Bobby fell and broke her leg? And what did she say? Bobby wondered. She asked me if I put that in writing, Jennifer replied. Both girls burst out laughing. Kimmy isn't your biggest fan, Jennifer said. Well, duh, Bobby replied, rolling her eyes, imitating her little brother Sean. Well, duh was Sean's favorite expression. Well, I'm glad she's not quitting, Bobby said. Really? Why? Jennifer demanded, closing the textbook in her lap and tossing it onto the couch opposite Bobby. Because it would make me feel really bad, Bobby said with emotion. Jennifer snickered. Having her around might make you feel a lot worse, Bobby. She won't talk to you, you know that, and she'll probably try to turn the other girls against you. I'm sure she's been on the phone night and day with those two pals of hers, Deborah and Ronnie. Bobby sighed and pulled both hands back through her hair. You know, it's only a cheerleading squad. It's supposed to be fun. Tell that to Kimmy, Jennifer said softly. She shifted her weight in the wheelchair. Ow. Are you okay? Bobby asked, leaning forward, preparing to jump up if her friend needed help of some kind. Yeah, fine. Jennifer forced a smile. Let's change the subject, okay? Yeah, okay. Bobby settled back on the couch. Do you know Charles Chesner? Chip? Sure. Jennifer's smile broadened. Chip is a real babe. I've had a crush on him since 3rd grade. He's cuter now, though. He asked me out tomorrow after the game, Bobby confided. Jennifer's eyes widened in surprise. Huh? Chip. Bobby nodded. Yeah, he asked me out yesterday, after the pep rally. Really? Bobby was startled to see Jennifer's eyes narrow and her features tighten. Jennifer glared at Bobby. You didn't say yes, did you? Chapter 10. Jen, what's wrong? Bobby asked. Jennifer shook her head, then locked her eyes on Bobby's. Don't you know that Chip is Kimmy's boyfriend? Huh? Bobby's mouth dropped open in shock. She suddenly could feel the blood pulsing at her temples. I mean, he was Kimmy's boyfriend, Jennifer said, gripping the sides of the wheelchair, until a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks? Yeah, Jennifer frowned. Then he dumped her, just like that, after more than 2 years. Oh my gosh! Bobby slumped down in the soft leather couch. She seemed to deflate. The shock of this news made her feel weak. She'll think Chip dumped her for you. Jennifer finished the thought for her. Bobby moaned. One more reason for Kimmy to hate my guts? They stared at each other in silence for a while. Jennifer squeaked her wheelchair back and forth on the floor. Finally, Bobby asked, What should I do? Jennifer shrugged. I don't know. He's really cute. Girls, how about getting up a little energy? Miss Green said. It was more of a complaint than a question, and she said the words with disgust. Having blown her whistle and stepped onto the floor to interrupt the practice, she did an imitation of the way they looked to her, moving her arms and legs in weary slow motion, her eyes half closed, her mouth drooping open. The cheerleaders watched in sullen silence. Bobby felt embarrassed. She was leading the practice after all. It was her job to get the girls to show some spirit, not Miss Green's. But Bobby was finding it difficult to get some of the girls to listen to her, even though it was the last practice before the game that night. Kimmy had done a good job of turning the girls against Bobby. It hadn't been hard, Bobby realized unhappily. The girls had all known Kimmy for years. Bobby was a newcomer, an intruder. Most of the cheerleaders hadn't wanted to allow the Kokorans on the squad in the first place. And now here is Bobby, giving them instructions, leading them, or trying to lead them, trying to get them to cooperate. When you do steam heat like that, Miss Green was scolding them, it makes me think your boiler's broken. It was supposed to be a joke, but it fell flat on the dispirited squad. No one even cracked a smile. Standing beside Miss Green, Bobby let her eyes wander down the row of girls. She stopped at Kimmy, who was glaring at her, her eyes narrowed. Kimmy's stare was so hard, so cold, it forced Bobby to look away. The gym doors opened and Jennifer wheeled herself in. Smiling at Bobby, she made her way silently along the far wall, her maroon and white pennant on her lap, her backpack attached to her wheelchair. Bobby wished Jennifer hadn't come. She felt embarrassed to have Jennifer show up while the girls were being lectured by Miss Green. Jennifer would see that Bobby didn't have control, that the girls weren't with her. She knew Jennifer would be sympathetic. She was Bobby's best friend after all, but it was still embarrassing. Bobby felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Corky, who gave her an encouraging smile, and then quickly resumed her place. Bobby took a deep breath. Okay, guys, she shouted, clapping her hands enthusiastically and moving in front of Miss Green. Let's try it again. Let's get really steamed up. She saw Kimmy roll her eyes and sarcastically mutter something to Deborah. Then the girls lined up and began the steam heat routine, this time with a little more enthusiasm than before. It wasn't great. Ronnie was out of step for the entire last part of it, but Bobby didn't think it was worth making them do it again. As the routine ended with a cheer and a spread eagle, she turned to see Jennifer and Miss Green talking heatedly near the wall. Miss Green was leaning over the wheelchair, close to Jennifer's ear. Both of them were shaking their heads as they spoke. Are they talking about me? Bobby wondered, dread building in the pit of her stomach. Is Miss Green complaining about me? About how I haven't been able to win over the girls? Are we finished? Kimmy's shrill question made Bobby turn back to the line of girls. Yeah, I guess, Bobby said distractedly. Well, can we go? Kimmy asked impatiently. I mean, the game's in a few hours. We have to go home and have dinner and everything, don't we? Kimmy was making no attempts to hide her dislike of Bobby. To her dismay, Bobby saw that some of the other girls seemed to adopt Kimmy's attitude. They all agree with her, Bobby thought, her head suddenly pounding, her temples throbbing. They probably all think that Kimmy should be captain, not me. And now even Jennifer and Miss Green are talking about me. We'll meet here in the gym at 7, Bobby announced dispiritedly, avoiding their eyes by glancing up at the scoreboard clock. Ronnie will be in charge of equipment? Ronnie rolled her eyes and cast a glance at Kimmy. No fire batons tonight, Bobby announced. That routine needs a lot more work. We'll try it for homecoming next week. The girls picked up their belongings and quickly made their way out of the gym. Bobby stood in the middle of the floor, her shoulders slumped, feeling discouraged, watching the girls exit. I thought it went a lot better that last time, Corky said, offering an encouraging smile. Liar, Bobby muttered. Corky shrugged. No, really. Thanks, Bobby said dryly, watching Jennifer and Miss Green still talking animatedly. You coming straight home? Corky bent to scratch one knee. Her hair was damp from perspiration. At least one cheerleader is really trying, Bobby thought miserably. Go on without me, she told her sister. I've got to get all my stuff. Giving her a quick, playful salute, Corky obediently headed to the door. With a sigh, Bobby turned and saw that Jennifer and Miss Green had disappeared into the advisor's office in the corner. She pulled the whistle from around her neck and, swinging it by its cord, began walking slowly toward the door. Being cheerleader captain is supposed to be fun, she thought regretfully. Well, she told herself, I'll find a way to win them over, maybe even Kimmy. Once again, she remembered Kimmy's cold stare and shuddered. She stepped into the hallway, which was empty and silent. Her sneakers squeaked along the hard floor. She turned a corner, climbed the stairs to the first floor, and headed to her locker to collect her books and jacket. The long corridor stretched before her like a tunnel. The lights had been dimmed to save energy. Gray lockers lined both walls. The classrooms were dark and empty. Bobby coughed, the sound echoing through the long tunnel. The loud crash behind her made her jump and cry out. She spun around in time to see a locker door swing open, then slam shut. Oh! Another crash, in front of her. She turned to see 2 lockers against the right wall swing open. As she stared in disbelief, 2 more lockers pulled open. The doors seemed to hesitate, then slammed shut with deafening force. Her mouth opened in a silent cry. Bobby gaped in astonishment. Doors slammed, then swung open again. Bang! Bang! The sound echoed until it became a terrifying roar. Bang! Bang! Both rows of locker doors swung open at once, as if pulled by invisible hands. No! Bobby cried. This isn't happening. I'm imagining this. Her heart pounding, she dropped the whistle and began to run, past swinging, slamming locker doors, through the echoing sounds, a barrage like gunfire. No! Stop! The wall of lockers on her left swung open in unison, then slammed shut with a deafening crash. No, please! She held her hands over her ears and ran, and then she heard the screams. A girl screaming in horror, high-pitched, shrill screams of anguish, of pain. Who's there? Bobby wondered, running between the slamming lockers. Who is it? The girl screamed again, the sound rising above the thunder of the lockers. And again. Bobby's sneakers pounded against the floor. She ran blindly through the dark hallway, locker doors swinging open, then slamming shut on both sides of her. Another scream of agony. Bobby reached the end of the corridor, turned the corner, and stared in surprise. Chapter 11. No one there. The front hall was deserted. Silence. Hello? Bobby called. No reply. No screams. The only sound now was that of her loud, gasping breaths. Hello? Anyone there? She called out in a hoarse, choked voice. Silence. No one. Confused and frightened, her hands pressed tightly to her burning cheeks, Bobby turned back. and peered cautiously down the long, dim corridor. The dark lockers along the walls were all shut tight. Her ears rang from the crashing, banging sounds they had made, but now they stood still and silent. She took a reluctant step, then another, expecting them to fly open again, to begin their frightening symphony. Silence. No lockers banging, no girl screaming in terror. Her legs trembling, Bobby made her way to her locker. She opened the combination lock with a shaking hand and pulled the door open. She glanced down the hall, still silent and empty. The silence seemed to echo in her mind. Am I cracking up? Am I totally losing it? She pulled out the things she needed, stuffed them into her backpack, locked the door, and ran. At home in the upstairs room they shared, Corky didn't believe her. You're very tired, she said sympathetically from her desk, where she was trying to cram in a little homework before she had to leave for the game. You've been under a lot of pressure. You don't believe me? Bobby shrieked, immediately angry at herself for not keeping her cool. Corky stared at her sister thoughtfully. Locker doors flying open? I know it sounds crazy, Bobby started. The hall was dark, right? Corky interrupted, tapping her pencil against her open textbook. It was late. You were tired. Practice was rough. You're nervous about the game tonight. Bobby started to protest, then changed her mind. With a loud sigh, she tossed herself onto her bed. I wouldn't believe me either, she muttered softly. I wouldn't? She stopped and gasped in horror, staring across the room. Corky followed her sister's frightened gaze. Both girls watched in silent terror as the closet door swung open. Chapter 12. It's happening again? Bobby uttered, her voice a choked whisper. Corky raised her hands to her face, her eyes wide with fear, and stared open-mouthed as the closet door continued to move. And Sean stepped out. A triumphant grin spread across his face, his eyes sparkling with evil glee. Hi, he said, giving them a nonchalant wave. Oh! Bobby jumped up, her hands balling into fists at her sides. You little creep! Corky screamed. She grabbed Sean by the neck and pretended to choke him. He collapsed to his knees in a fit of giggles. How long have you been in the closet? Bobby demanded, joining Corky and holding him down on the floor. It wasn't me. It was a ghost, he said. Both girls began tickling him furiously. Ow! 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 He cried, squirming and laughing. All three of them were laughing hysterically now, wrestling on the floor. Digging her fingers into Sean's bony ribs, Bobby glanced up at the clock. Oh? She rolled away and stood up. Come on, Corky. We've got to eat dinner and change. We'll be late for the game. Corky gave Sean one last hard tickle, then climbed to her feet. Shadyside's going to lose, Sean called after them, following them downstairs. Shadyside stinks. The excitement of the game, the cheers of the Shadyside fans who filled the stadium, the white lights cutting through the chill of the night, making the field brighter than daylight under the starless black sky, forced all thoughts of that afternoon from Bobby's mind. Tigers growl, tigers roar, do it again, more, more, more! Across the field, the Winstead High cheerleaders, in their blue and gold uniforms, were clapping and cheering, rousing the few hundred Winstead fans in the away team bleachers. Their cries barely carried over the cheers and shouts that roared down from the Shadyside supporters, and the loud blasts and drum rolls from the Shadyside marching band in their own bleachers near the end zone. Tigers roar, tigers growl, we want a touchdown, now, now, now! Her eyes darting back and forth from the game on the field to the crowd in the stadium, Bobby led the girls through their cheers. They were on stage now, in full view of everyone. The bitterness and rivalries that had created so much ill feeling in practice were all forgotten. Bobby was in charge, and no one questioned her commands. She called out the cheers and routines they were going to perform as she carefully watched the action on the field. Go team, go team, go, 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 go! The cheers thundered down from the stadium, punctuated by applause and excited shouts. Bobby glanced quickly down the line of cheerleaders, catching a smile of encouragement from Corky at the far end. Before the game, Ronnie had complained that she wasn't feeling well, that she thought she was coming down with the flu, but Bobby saw that she was giving 100%, cheering with her usual enthusiasm. At the far end of the players' bench, Bobby spotted Jennifer. She was in her wheelchair, a maroon blanket over her lap, waving her Shadyside pennant. Their eyes met. Jennifer, smiling happily, waved. Bobby waved back. Whistles blew on the field. Bobby heard laughter spread across the stadium bleachers. She turned to see the cause of the interruption. A white wire-haired terrier had run onto the field. 2 Shadyside players were trying to chase it to the sidelines, but the dog, enjoying the attention, ran in wide circles, its stub of a tail wagging furiously. Finally, one of the referees managed to pick the dog up. He jogged to the sidelines with it to a loud chorus of good-natured boos. Then whistles rang out for the game to resume. Bobby stared over the heads of the players on the bench, watching Chip lead the offense out of the huddle. The first quarter had been pretty even. Both teams had been able to move the ball, although neither team had scored. Now, as the second quarter began, the Tigers were starting on the Winstead 35-yard line. Good field position. The cheers grew louder. The noise level in the stadium rose as if someone had turned up the volume control. Watching Chip step behind the center, Bobby wondered what he was thinking. Was he thinking about the Winstead linemen staring at him from under their helmets, about to come charging toward him? Was he thinking about the play he had called? Was he nervous? Was he scared to death? She decided she'd have to ask him these questions when she met him after the game. After the game. She forced that thought out of her mind. She couldn't think about that now. She had to concentrate, stay alert, stay on the ball. She heard Chip call out the signals in his loud, high-pitched voice. Then she saw him take the snap from center. He took a few steps back. He raised his arm to throwing position. Another step back, his arm ready to throw. The crowd roared. Bobby held her breath. Chip seemed to freeze, his arm cocked, his feet planted firmly on the grass. He stood there until 2 Winstead tacklers swarmed over him and pushed him to the ground. Bobby realized she had been holding her breath the whole time. She exhaled, turned to the cheerleaders, and called out a clapping cheer. What had happened to Chip, she wondered, moving in line and clapping. The cheer was drowned out by muttering and heated voices. People in the stands must be asking the same question, she realized. Chip had had plenty of time to throw, but he hadn't even pumped his arm. He didn't seem to be looking for a receiver, and he hadn't tried to scramble away when the line came crashing in on him. Oh well, thought Bobby, it's just one play. She and the cheerleaders finished the cheer and turned back to the game. Some of the players on the bench had climbed to their feet, so Bobby had to move closer to see the playing field. The stadium grew quiet as Chip stepped up to the center, quiet enough for Bobby to hear the Winstead cheerleaders on the far side of the field. Again, Bobby held her breath as Chip took the ball and stepped back. It appeared to be a running play. Dave Johnson, the Tigers' big running back, came crunching forward, his arms outstretched. But again, Chip froze in place. He didn't hand off the ball. Johnson ran past him into the line. Chip stood with the ball in his hands. He didn't run or step back to pass. "Oh!" Bobby cried out as Chip was tackled hard around the knees and dropped for a loss. Voices in the stadium bleachers cried out in surprise. The entire stadium seemed to buzz. Bobby heard a scattering of boos. She shook her head hard as if trying to force the play from her mind. "Let's do Go Tigers!" she called out. The girls lined up quickly, except for Kimmy, who remained just behind the players' bench, staring onto the field. "Kimmy?" Bobby called. But Kimmy didn't seem to hear her. She was staring straight ahead with the strangest expression on her face. "Kimmy?" Bobby repeated. But it was too late to do the cheer anyway. Chip was leading the team out of the huddle for the third down play. Again, the stadium grew quiet. The wind suddenly picked up, blowing the flag and the big Shadyside pennant beneath it on the pole, making them flap noisily, the rope clips clanging against the metal flagpole. "Come on, Chip," Bobby thought, crossing her fingers. Across the field, the cheerleaders in blue and gold were standing in a tight line, staring in rapt silence at the field. Chip took the ball from the center. Johnson came rolling toward him, but Chip kept the ball. It was a fake run. Chip backpedaled quickly and started to roll out. "Throw it!" Bobby screamed, cupping her hands to form a megaphone. "Throw it!" Chip stopped. He froze. "Throw it! Throw it!" Chip didn't move. He was holding the ball at his waist. "Throw it!" Shadyside players were shouting to him. "I'm open! I'm open!" Johnson was yelling downfield. Chip was frozen like a statue. Bobby's mouth dropped open in a silent cry as she saw the Winstead players close in on him. Several tacklers got to him at the same time. The ball dribbled out of Chip's hand as they covered him, pulled him down, and piled on top of him. Players scrambled for the ball. Whistles blew. The stadium remained strangely silent. "They buried him," Bobby heard Kimmy say. "Buried him." Bobby moved closer to the sidelines, stepping in front of the players' bench. The Winstead players were slowly climbing off Chip, making their way triumphantly to their bench across the field. Buried him. Buried him. Bobby suddenly felt cold all over. The tacklers were all gone now, but Chip, sprawled flat on his back, wasn't getting up.